Hi, I'm Gary, and this is episode 229 of EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. On the show today, we'll be looking at charge point operator Be.EV. This season of the podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the free-to-download app that helps EV drivers search, plan, and pay for their charging. Before we start, I wanted to bring your attention once again to my ebooks. I've got two out there. One's called So You've Gone Electric, and the other's called So You've Gone Renewable. If you're thinking of getting an EV, or you're looking into solar panels, a heat pump, and a home battery, you can pick these up from Amazon for the measly sum of 99 pence or equivalent. Or, if you're in the Kindle lending library, you can read them for absolutely free. Don't worry, I won't hold it against you. Our main topic of discussion today is Be.EV. Now, listeners to the podcast will know that over the 200 plus episodes of this show, I've had the opportunity to talk with numerous members of the charge point operator community. In terms of the rapid charge providers, I've spoken with Ian Johnston from Osprey Charging, Adrian Keane from Instavolt, Sam Clark from GridServe, Tom Hurst from Fastned, Dee Humphries from GD-Point, James McKemmy from PodPoint. I also spoke with Patrick Dunn from Smart Charge, the Sainsbury's CPO, earlier this season. And in my quest to chat with all the major charge point operators, I've managed to snag another one.
So, Adrian Fielden-Gray, I'm the co-founder and chief operating officer at Be.EV.
Be.EV, that's Be.EV, are a national charge point operator. They were initially formed in the Manchester area and expanding out from there quite rapidly. Nationally, I believe.
So, yes, national rollout, I think, is the number one point to make. But obviously, more of our kind of legacy and existing network is a lot more northwest focused because that's where it all began. And we've also kind of a big part of the original kind of genesis of this was the Transport for Greater Manchester contract, where we upgraded and refreshed and then operate a network on their behalf effectively. But then therefore the natural kind of growth out, we always wanted to go for quite a regional strategy and concentration. So kind of built out more around Greater Manchester, then built out in the northwest. And then now we're building out then across kind of strategic places across the UK. And so, yeah, now we do have sites from, kind of Cumbrian and Wales, the Mendips to London, the northeast. So, yeah, we're kind of spreading, but kind of it's a strategic kind of expansion rather than just scattergun approach. Because what we always wanted to avoid was having, 2 charged in Bournemouth and 2 charged in Inverness and then not really being able to properly maintain them. Because what we've always wanted to make sure is we've got a really high available and well-maintained and serviced network. We don't want there to be some white elephants as we've seen somewhere else, effectively abandoned charges. We always wanted to make sure we expanded sensibly and strategically and make sure that we really are able to kind of offer the best customer experience through the network as we go.
So how is the rollout going in terms of finding sites? Be.EV are partnered with Dobbies, the garden centre chain, and are leveraging those sites. Anything else?
Our preferred approach is very much partnering and then just effectively leasing a number of bays in an existing car park. That's the majority of our pipeline, the majority of our rollout. But we do have some sites where either it could be a greenfield where there's a developer building something there, and then we'd kind of go alongside them. We have bought one bit of land in Manchester where we're rolling out our first charging green, and that's had some really interesting work. It's a former petrol station, but it's been abandoned for over 10 years, and we had to decontaminate the site, take out the old fuel tanks. So it's a really interesting kind of story within there of like going from the old to the new. But actually, yeah, the general, that's kind of a bit of that's more the kind of the smaller side of the future pipeline. The majority of it going forward is actually, I say, partners, existing car parks, and us partnering with them to offer EV charging to both their existing client base and visitors, but also then hopefully attracting a new footfall to the sites as well.
But as we all know, one key constraint is always power provision to the new sites.
Yeah, as you know, and the power available on a site is a large defining factor of the ultimate solution. But where our strategy now is very heavily on the ultra rapid rollout, where we can use load balancing like the Kempower solutions. Then that's always great to try and do. That every site's specific, as you know, but we'll do anything from 2 bays to 16 bays. But yeah, the focus is on the ultra rapid, and obviously trying to find the right solution for the right sites. But yeah, we do have some where we're still putting in just a couple of bays, and then you might hopefully expand it in the future if the demand is there. But yeah, as you know, a lot of the time it can often be a bit power dependent, where we'd like to do one thing, but there's just not the power available there to do that.
Be.EV have a range of different charger hardware according to the power available, but they're one of the newest CPOs who seem to have attached themselves very much to Kempower as the hardware supplier of choice. So why is that, Adrian?
So as a business, we've always wanted to be very kind of true to partnerships. So there's some people that have been there since the very start when me and Asset first set up, and they maybe helped us back then, and we always like to return on loyalty. So we're not in the business of chopping and changing every 5 minutes just to save £1 an hour, whether it's subcontractors installing the chargers or whether it's agencies or contractors working with us. We always want to try and build deep partnerships. I think that's a kind of really key thing to state first of all. In terms of the hardware, again, ultimately we've did reviews of the market. We landed on at the time the Raptions and the Kempowers, and we again wanted to make sure that we're trying to provide a kind of fairly consistent customer experience. We obviously keep our ear to the ground, and we're always testing new chargers as well. So we are technology agnostic, but we always want to make sure that anything we put in the ground has been very well tested. We know it's going to give a good customer experience. And so that's kind of a key thing for us. So rather than kind of continually turning and changing what we're installing, it's actually making sure it's done kind of the right way. Then we're committing for a period, and then we then re-review with what's on the market at the moment.
Of course, a network is only as good as its maintenance and support. So from a Be.EV point of view, talk to me about that.
Largely outsourced, again, kind of in line with our general business model, building and forging deep partnerships, but we can do certain things in-house as well. So in terms of your general maintenance, got a couple of providers that are doing that for us. Troubleshooting, so earlier this year, we transitioned with Fuse, Lancaster-based. So they now do the app, the back office, the customer call center. But within all of that, it gives us a greater ability ourselves as well. So our network team are able to kind of directly resolve any issues that might be coming up. But ultimately, what we really want to get to is we want to be getting there before the customer. So actually, if there is an issue with the charger, we know about it already and we're already solving it, rather than it getting to a point where a customer's getting to site, trying the charger and finding an issue. It needs to become the other way. And that's where, again, having really good partnerships with our supply chain, that they are actively monitoring the network. And then also our team are also actively monitoring the network as well. So that, as I say, we can hopefully be ahead of the curve and resolve any issues before anyone even knows that it's happened.
Now, as with BP Pulse in a recent episode, the pricing model for Be.EV is a little complicated. You run a 3x3 matrix, which gives different price depending on the power of the charger, the payment method, and the time of day. And at the time we recorded this interview, you've also got a promotion with a subset of chargers near the M60 with a completely different pricing model. So isn't this just a little bit confusing?
Okay, two parts to this, I think, as well, is obviously it's always going to be more expensive charging on the public network than at home, mainly because of the cost to put the kit in the ground in the first place. For that, hopefully you get a better experience, faster charging and the rest. And obviously trying to make it more accessible to everyone, EV charging. In terms of our pricing, so earlier this year, we actually dropped our prices, which not that many CPOs had done. So I'd like to think that we were one of the kind of the early leaders on that perspective, because obviously we had the big spike of electricity pricing following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And we've had a very volatile electricity market. And then as that started to come back down, okay, maybe not to the original levels, but at least stabilize a bit, then we wanted to make sure that we passed on any then subsequent reduction in our supply tariff, we wanted to pass it on to our customers because that's the right thing to do. In terms of what we were listening to our customers as well. And because we've got effectively fast, rapid and ultra rapid charges, previously rapid and ultra rapid were priced the same, but we were hearing from our customers that actually that's not what they thought was right. And they wanted to be paying a bit less for the rapid compared to the ultra rapid. So we did separate those pricing. So we ended up with effectively 3, fast, rapid and ultra rapid, but it's based on what the customers wanted. We've then also got a member program where people get a discount of 5p per kilowatt hour. It's free to sign up to. So that's why you then get the next layer. The customers also wanted to be able to benefit from off-peak pricing. And again, our supply tariff was cheaper at night than it was at the day. So we wanted to pass that on to the customer. So then again, on certain charges, it's 5p cheaper again if you're at nighttime. So I know it sounds like a 9-price grid. It's actually 3 prices, but there's 2 types of discounts. You can get 5p off if you're a member, another 5p off if you're a member at nighttime. Way to kind of go about it. And then we also, I say, sometimes there are promotions for specific sites as well. But ultimately, it came back to what does the customer want and also passing on the savings that we were getting to the customer.
We spoke with Sarah Sloman from Paythrough last week about payment anxiety and the white paper that they've released on this. One thing the Paythrough report identified is that people want to know exactly what they're going to pay for a charge. Now, when a customer rocks up at your charger, how do they know with certainty what price they're going to be charged?
Basically, it's not like the 9 grid is available to everyone. It's if you're charging through your app, it will tell you the price you get on the app at that charger. Mm-hmm. If you're charging through Electroverse or ZapPay, it will tell you the price you're getting for that. Whereas if you're just paying at the charger by contactless, then on the charger, it will tell you the price you're paying for the contactless. So it's not like people are always seeing the different pricing. It's actually the mode you are using. It tells you the price. Mm-hmm. But then we're also trying to highlight whether it's through signage on the charger that says, actually, you can also charge cheaper if download the app or charge at nighttime. So we're trying to make people aware that there are ways to charge cheaper, but when they are interacting with the charger, actually, it should be quite clear. The method they are doing at that specific charger, the price is X. So it's hopefully clear at the point of sale.
One more thing on pricing. As someone who worked with a taxi company, I'm acutely aware of the fact that taxi drivers love cheap charging. Now, I noticed that you have a specific rate for taxi drivers in Manchester, which is 50 pence a kilowatt hour. Now, the pragmatist within me is asking, if you can afford 50 pence a kilowatt hour for taxi drivers, why can't you afford 50 pence a kilowatt hour for everyone?
This one in particular is actually a Transport for Greater Manchester initiative that we support them with. So there's some grant funding for a number of taxi chargers, which we help to install and we operate as part of the network. So it's only on those chargers that there is this beneficial price. And ultimately it is there's a cleared ambition for the region to try and help more taxi drivers convert to electric. Say we're supporting them with that. But yeah, it's more through the Transport for Greater Manchester partnership, and there was some OZEV funding that helped support the actual install of those chargers. The capital outlay for them was a bit different. But yeah, therefore there is a very specific taxi scheme going on where it's on taxi specific charges with a taxi specific tariff. Whereas the rest of our network is whether you're a taxi driver, a van driver, fleet, personal, anything else, actually for the rest of the network, it's all the same to all users.
Right, moving on. Let's talk pre-authorizations. You charge £5 on rapids and fast chargers and £25 on ultra rapids. Now that's relatively low in the big scheme of things across the industry. How do you make the risk calculation to arrive at those figures?
Realistically, the reason for that, we know that pre-authorizations can sometimes be a headache for customers, but it's getting that balance correct between, pre-authorization is there for a reason in terms of you want to make sure that you're not having fraudulent activity. You want to make sure that people have the funds there. There's also a whole bunch of extra technical bits that go into it in terms of actually making sure you can then take the full amount later, but I'm not going to go into that. Glad to know. But therefore, what it is actually just doing it for different types of charge, just because of actually the expected total bill, if you like, total amount of charge on a fast charge, it's cheaper in the first place, the tariff we're charging, and the average charge amount is generally lower compared to the ultra rapid. So we just separated it between the two of them more to try and get that balance between what the customer wants, because what a customer doesn't want is to have lots and lots of pre-auths held up on their card. And, that had happened in the past, and we wanted to make sure we're trying to help rectify that. But on the flip side, you also want to make sure that the pre-auth is of the correct amount, such that we don't then have issues at the end of the charge where the bank suddenly goes, oh, wait a minute, the pre-auth wasn't with the correct amount. So, it's one of those things that I didn't know much about before going into this industry. And then actually now you're starting to find out about these pieces that come up, and you have to kind of address them.
Any listener to this show will know that I'm not a fan of the third-party add-on credit card readers that a lot of CPOs use. Now, talk to me about what Be.EV have done with the Kempower units and adding readers in there.
We've generally approached it through collaboration with the charge point manufacturer. It continues to evolve, I think, is what I would say with this. So what may have been how things started doesn't necessarily always mean that's where it finishes. Again, it's just working with them, working out the best solutions and which ones work. But yeah, we do use third-party card readers. It's another party in the chain, should we say. I think customers probably often think it's as simple as, you plug in and you tap your card and that's going straight through Be.EV. But actually, the number of parties that are actually in the middle of that, you've got the reader, you've got the merchant, you've got all these other parties that it has to go through, and you have to set it all up correctly in the first place to make sure it doesn't fall down on the way.
Of course, when it comes to payment, the holy grail is plug and charge. No cards, no apps, no readers. Just plug the connector in and off you go. How close are you to that?
Something we're actively looking at, I think, is what I would say. There are, I say it almost as it seems typical these days, not in just this industry, but there's more than one option, I think, is the piece. It's not just a case of actually there's one version of it that's going to be the future, and you either say yes or no of whether you want to do it. Actually, there's a number of options out there, both from a customer experience, but also for an implementation perspective. Some need updates to the actual site themselves. Some need updates to your back office or your app. So again, all of these need a full review. But yeah, it is something we're actively looking at the moment. And there's also kind of which partners are doing it best. Tesla's a bit of a different world, I think, isn't it? Given that, Tesla start with a car and then they started building chargers to support their car sales. Whereas we're coming from this slightly opposite direction of we're building chargers and then trying to make sure we offer the best customer experience to all electric vehicles. So got to make sure that we're thinking about it in the correct way before. We don't want to roll out something and then find out it's not giving a good customer experience. That's the key for us. We want to make sure that what we do decide to go with is really what people want, and also it's going to work well.
Well, let's move on to accessibility. At first glance, there seems to be reasonably good adherence at a lot of the Be.EV sites to the PAS 1899 standards for accessibility, which are minimums after all. Talk to me a little bit about accessibility at your sites.
I think the accessibility piece, it's crucial we get this right. I think a big part of it is also making sure that the site owners actually understand it as well. I think you'll find, as I know you've picked up on some of your other episodes, that actually sometimes you can have these 2 bays or these 4 bays for charging, but you can't take any more space because there might be restrictions under their leases or anything else. So that gets quite difficult when you're trying to have the conversation where actually you've got one party that's wanting to use as little space as possible. And we're saying, well, we want to make sure that bays are accessible, wide enough, etc., or have like one PAS compliant, etc. Being honest, I think actually now this is starting to come around now. And I think that education piece with site owners and other parties is now coming up, and they're kind of that thought process is maturing, and they're recognizing that actually it's better for them to actually assign a bit of that extra space and make sure that you are factoring in accessibility to the sites. We can also try and be as creative as we can try to be. So actually, we've got a great new site in Derbyshire called Saltergate, where actually we had a bit of a quirky space, should we say, But what we've tried to make sure we do is actually really maximize what space we have to make sure we can get as accessible as possible. We've got one fully accessible and then 3 accessible bays. And it's because we worked with our designers to really try and maximize it rather than just going, okay, just put in a standard solution there, which would have actually ended up being a bit cramped. Actually, we're trying to be creative where we can be. And as I say, I think the good thing is that the market's maturing and it's not just us, it's also the site owners also need to be really attuned into this.
Last question for you now, Adrian. There is a perception that a lot of charge point operators are ripping people off with the rates they levy for public charging. Are you doing that? Are you making a huge profit?
If you look on a site-by-site basis, some sites, yes. And other sites, if they're only new, they say they're starting to build up that utilization. The other way to have to think about this as well is there's a large upfront investment that is required to put these chargers in the ground, which is why we have the likes of Artificial Energy Generation and NatWest and KfW supporting us in the rollout of that. So when you're starting to factor in, that's why it's it's a heavy upfront capital intensive industry, but the models work over 20 plus years that we're looking at this. It's not a case of you expecting to get all that back in the first 2 years like you might in some other industries. So actually, are we on track? Yeah, we're on track. And that's the key thing. And that is what helps to give the confidence to continue rolling out more and more chargers to secure more funding as we go forward.
So we've got a couple of things to think about here. Firstly, on the subject of pricing, I can see the logic behind having multiple pricing levels, depending on the speed of the charger, etc. But just as when BP Pulse came on the show and discussed this, I'll say what I said to them. This is a potentially complex and confusing situation, especially when taking into consideration the pay-through white paper that Sarah Sloman discussed on last week's episode of the show. Now, I asked Be.EV for their official position on subscriptions, as we discussed subscriptions a week or two back, and they replied, quote, Be.EV has over 40,000 members across the country. These members benefit from exclusive offers and discounted pricing tariffs, all for no added cost, end quote. So I guess that means no specific subscriptions. So what do we think about Be.EV? Good model? Anyone use them on a trip? What was your experience? Let me know at info@evmusings.com, which is also the place to write if there's a charge point operator you want me to chat with. We've done 2 this season already. We've covered all the major ones. Who else should I be approaching? This season, we're looking at raising the awareness of carbon literacy with our listeners. One way we're doing that is with the Carbon Fact House read by carbon literacy trainer Anne Snelson.
2.5 billion single-use plastic and paper cups are used in the UK each year, only 1 in 400 of which are recycled. The rest go straight to landfill. So please use your own beaker or bottle whenever you can. And if possible, avoid using single-use plastic bottles.
It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with your listeners. Now, if you speak to a lot of non-EV drivers, they always tend to quote range when it comes to one reason they won't consider an electric car. And most EV drivers respond by saying, but it can do 200 miles. And the problem for a lot of people is that 200 miles doesn't really mean a great deal to many people. They don't tend to think in terms of how far 200 miles is. What they do tend to think in terms of is where they can get to from a given point. ChargeTrip is a company that's created a mapping web page using what they call a range spider. With a starting position, a type of car, and some information about the weather, it can draw a realistic map showing exactly how far that car can drive from that point, including things like the road network and terrain. It's quite good, and it's a very useful way of illustrating what can and can't be achieved with an electric vehicle. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers in the UK, which helps EV drivers search, plan, and pay for their charging. ZapMap is free to download and use, with ZapMap Premium providing enhanced features which include using ZapMap in-car, on CarPlay or Android Auto, and helping with charging costs with both a pricing filter and a 5% discount on charging. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's show. It's put together this week with the help of Adrian Fielden-Gray and his team at Be.EV. Many thanks for their help and participation. If you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms, or other general messages to pass on to me, I can be reached at info@evmusings.com. On the socials, I'm on Twitter or X at MusingsEV. I'm also on Instagram at EV Musings, where I post short videos and podcast extracts regularly. Why not follow me there? Thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon on a monthly basis and through coffee.com on an ad hoc one. If you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to coffee.com/EVmusings and you can do just that. ko-fi.com/EVmusings. Takes Apple Pay too. Regular listeners will know about my 2 ebooks, So You've Gone Electric and So You've Gone Renewable. They're 99p each or equivalent and you can get them on Amazon. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as a link to my regular EV Musings newsletter and associated articles. Now, I know you're probably driving or walking or jogging right now as you listen, but if you can remember and you enjoyed this episode, drop me a review in iTunes, please. It really helps me out. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you. Why not let me know you've got to this point by tweeting me at MusingsEV with the words, Mancunian power, mad for it. Hashtag if you know, you know, nothing else. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. You know he's quite the entrepreneur, always looking to get into the latest and greatest money-making thing. His next venture is a housing development where everyone lives in a row with one neighbour either side in exclusive developments of small clusters like this. It'll cost a fortune to make, but he's very selective about who gets in.
Basically, it's not like the 9 grid is available to everyone.
Thanks for listening. Bye!